They laughed at him in the alien market, a lonely human standing in the middle of a crowd, staring at a girl with a sack on her head. She was silent, unwanted, and sold for only 3 credits, barely the price of a cheap meal. No one cared who she was. No one wanted to know what was hidden under that sack. But the human, he did something no one else dared. He raised his hand and paid for her. Just $3. The crowd burst into laughter, calling him a fool. Yet when the sack was removed, his world changed forever, because she was not what they thought. She was something more, something dangerous, something precious, and from that moment, their lives would never be the same. The market was crowded with voices, lights, and strange smells from alien food stalls. Traders shouted, buyers argued, and creatures from a dozen worlds moved through the dust and noise. In the middle of it all stood Ethan, a human who had been living far from Earth for too long. He often felt like a ghost drifting through places that were never meant for him. Today, however, his steps slowed as he noticed a gathering crowd. A raised platform stood at the center. Creatures in rough clothes were pushing cages forward, showing those inside as if they were objects. The auctioneer shouted prices, his voice sharp and fast. Some beings were sold quickly: strong workers, rare creatures, and servants who could sing or cook. Every time a bid was called, the crowd grew louder. Ethan usually turned away from such things, but something made him stop this time. At the far end of the line, there was one figure who did not move. A girl stood with her hands tied, her head covered by a rough sack that reached down to her shoulders. She did not cry or struggle. She was still. So quiet it was as if the world had forgotten she existed. The auctioneer waved a hand at her and laughed. This one, worthless, 3 credits. Who will waste their money on this? The crowd broke into laughter. Some shouted cruel jokes. Others turned away, uninterested. No one wanted her. Ethan's eyes fixed on the strange figure. He could not see her face, but he felt a weight in the air around her, as if there was more than silence under that sack. The auctioneer shouted again, 3 credits. Just 3. Come on, someone must want a shadow to carry water for them. The crowd kept laughing. No hand was raised. Ethan felt something stir inside him. He remembered the lonely nights on his ship, the way silence pressed in when no one was there to speak. He remembered what it felt like to be unseen, to walk through places where no one cared if he lived or died. The girl on the stage was like that silence, standing alone, forgotten. Before he could stop himself, his hand went up. The laughter grew louder. A human, he wants her, someone shouted. The auctioneer grinned, his teeth flashing. Sold 3 credits to the human fool. Coins clinked as Ethan paid. The crowd still laughed, pointing at him as if he had bought a broken object. But Ethan ignored them. He walked to the stage, and the girl was pushed into his care. Her steps were weak, her head still covered. She did not resist, but he could feel her trembling. They moved away from the crowd, through the market streets where neon lights flickered and strange machines hummed. Ethan carried a small bag of supplies, and now he also guided the girl with the sack on her head. People stared, whispered, then lost interest. To them, she was nothing. To Ethan, however, there was a strange pull he could not explain. When they reached his small ship docked at the edge of the market, he finally stopped. The engines were quiet, the air heavy with silence. He looked at her. She stood there, still covered, her shoulders drawn in as if expecting another blow. "You're safe now," Ethan said softly. The words felt strange on his tongue because he was not sure if they were true. He reached up, hesitated, then slowly pulled the rough sack away. The cloth slid down and Ethan froze. The face revealed was not broken or ugly as the crowd had believed. She was alien. Yes, her skin carried a faint shimmer. Her eyes glowed softly with a light not born from any lamp. She was delicate, beautiful in a way that was both strange and familiar. Yet behind her beauty, there was fear, deep and sharp. Her eyes locked onto his, and in them he saw both a question and a warning. She did not speak, but her silence spoke louder than any word. Ethan stepped back, his breath caught in his throat. This was no ordinary girl. She was hiding something the market had not understood, something the crowd had laughed at without knowing the truth. for the first time in many years. Ethan's heart beat faster, not from danger, but from the sense that his life had just taken a turn he could not escape. The ship's lights flickered, and the silence deepened. She lowered her head, and in a soft, trembling voice, she whispered her first words to him. "You should not have saved me." Her voice was weak, yet it carried a weight heavier than the market crowd, heavier than the laughter, heavier than the whole day. Ethan felt a chill run through him, not from fear of her, but from the mystery behind those words. Somewhere far beyond the market, something had shifted. He could not see it yet, but the choice he made for 3 credits had already bound his fate to hers. The girl's eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the small light of the ship. The silence of the auction was gone, replaced by a new silence, one filled with questions, secrets, and the promise of a story that had only just begun. Ethan did not sleep that night. The small ship was quiet, but his mind was not. He sat on the edge of his narrow bed, watching the girl across the room. She sat with her knees drawn close to her chest, her glowing eyes shifting now and then toward him and then away again. She had not moved much since he removed the sack from her head. Her silence filled the space, pressing against him more than any sound could. He offered her food earlier, a simple packet from his supplies. She had only stared at it, then at him, and placed it carefully on the floor without opening it. It was not hunger that kept her still. It was something else, something heavier. Ethan did not push. He only placed water within her reach and went back to his seat, trying to understand who she was. The girl's skin shimmered faintly under the low light, as though starlight had settled on her. Her hair was thin and silver, falling in soft lines that caught every glint of the lamp above. And her eyes, they held stories he could not yet read. Sometimes they looked tired, sometimes they looked afraid, and sometimes, for just a moment, they seemed to search his face as if testing him. Hours passed. The hum of the ship's engines became the only sound. Ethan finally leaned back, trying to close his eyes. That was when he heard it, a soft hum, almost too faint to notice. At first, he thought it came from the ship's systems, but then he realized it was coming from her. A glow moved under her skin, pulsing like a quiet heartbeat of light. Ethan leaned forward carefully. "Are you hurt?" he asked, keeping his voice low. The girl's gaze flicked to him, her lips parted as though she wanted to answer, but no sound came out. Then she shook her head once, slowly, as if even that small gesture cost her strength. The glow faded, and the room fell back into shadows. Ethan wanted to ask more, but he stopped himself. She was not ready. Instead, he said, "You don't have to fear me. I don't know what happened to you, but you're safe here." Something in her expression softened for a heartbeat. Then her eyes fell to the floor again. She pulled the blanket he had given her tighter around her shoulders, curling up as though hiding from the weight of the universe. The night stretched long. When Ethan finally drifted into uneasy sleep, he dreamed of strange voices calling through the dark. When morning came, if morning could be called such in the endless black of space, Ethan rose and found her still watching him. This time, when he offered food, she slowly reached out. Her hands trembled as she unwrapped the packet. She ate carefully, like someone who had gone too long without trust in her meals. Ethan said nothing. He only watched quietly, and for the first time, she finished all of it. Later, when he was checking the ship's control systems, he felt her move closer. She stood behind him, silent, but he could sense her presence. After a pause, her voice came, soft but clear. "You should not have saved me," she said again. Ethan turned, meeting her glowing eyes. "Why?" She hesitated, as if each word she spoke carried the weight of secrets too dangerous to reveal. "Because they will come. They always come. No one who keeps me stays safe." Her words were quiet, yet they struck deep. Ethan waited, but she did not explain further. Instead, she turned away, walking back to her corner of the room. Ethan exhaled, pressing his hands against the console. Questions filled his mind. Who were they? Why had she been sold for almost nothing? And what was the light that moved under her skin? That night, when Ethan thought she had fallen asleep, he heard her whisper to herself in a language he did not know. The words carried a rhythm, like a song without melody. Then, Just as he was about to drift off, her voice changed. She spoke, in his tongue, so faintly he wondered if he imagined it. "My name is not for them to use anymore," she whispered. "But maybe he can know." The silence grew heavy again. Ethan kept his eyes closed, pretending to sleep, but inside, he felt something shift. The girl with the sack was no longer only a mystery. She was beginning to open a door that had been locked for too long. And yet, the air in the ship felt different now, charged with something unseen. Ethan could not explain it, but he knew they were no longer alone in the universe's eyes. Something was moving closer. He could almost feel it pressing at the edge of space. The girl looked at him once more before turning away, her faint glow casting shadows on the wall. She had not told him her name yet, but Ethan felt that when she did, everything around them would change. The silence between them was not empty anymore. It was waiting. Ethan woke to the sound of soft footsteps moving around the small cabin. For a moment, he thought he was still dreaming, but when he opened his eyes, he saw her. The girl was standing near the control panel, her glowing eyes scanning the lights and switches as if she understood more than she let on. Her hands hovered just above the controls, never touching, only studying. When she noticed Ethan watching, she froze. For a second, fear flashed in her eyes, as if she had been caught doing something forbidden. Ethan slowly sat up and gave a small smile. "You're curious," he said gently. "That's all right. Most people are when they see a ship's systems." Her lips pressed into a thin line, and she shook her head. Then, in a low whisper, she replied, "Not most people, just me. I remember things." Ethan tilted his head, waiting, but she turned away, wrapping her arms around herself as though hiding from her own words. He could feel the weight of her silence pressing between them. He moved closer, careful not to frighten her. "If you want, you can tell me," he said softly. "No one else will hear." Her eyes flickered, filled with doubt, but also with something else, longing. She sat down slowly, her back straight, her fingers curling into her lap. The glow in her skin brightened faintly, like a lantern hidden under a cloth. "My name," she said, pausing as though the word itself carried danger, "is Liara." Ethan repeated it quietly. "Liara." The sound felt strange in his mouth, but she seemed calmer hearing it spoken by him. "I was not always like this," she continued, her voice trembling. "I was not always silent or hidden beneath a sack. I was someone important on my world long ago. I was meant to guide my people. They called me heir, a daughter of the line that kept balance between power and peace." Her eyes darkened, the glow fading slightly, "but they grew afraid of me, afraid of what I could do. My power was not like theirs. It frightened them. Some wanted to protect me, but most wanted me gone, so they sold me, as if I was no more than a shadow to be discarded." Ethan listened without interrupting. The story felt heavy, but he sensed she had carried it far too long without sharing. "They covered my head so no one would see me," she said bitterly, "so no one would recognize the face they once bowed to. And the crowd believed the lie that I was broken, cursed, worthless. But they did not know the truth. They did not see what I carried inside." Her eyes met his then, sharp and searching. "And now you have seen it. You saw the light under my skin. You know I am not just a girl from a market." Ethan nodded slowly. "I saw, but I don't see something cursed. I see someone who doesn't deserve what was done to her." Liara's lips parted slightly, as if his words reached a place untouched by the cruelty she had endured. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then a faint smile tugged at the corner of her mouth, the first he had seen from her. "You are different," she whispered. "Others saw only danger. You see me." The silence that followed was not heavy anymore. It was lighter, filled with a fragile thread of trust. Ethan leaned back, letting her words settle, but deep inside, questions rose again. If she was once heir to a world, if she carried powers that frightened even her own people, what would happen now that she was here with him? Later, as the ship drifted in the dark stretch of space, Ethan noticed her standing near the small window. She was gazing at the stars, her silver hair glowing faintly in the light of distant suns. She spoke again, more to herself than to him. "They will not forget me, no matter how far I run. They will come, and when they find me, they will see You too. That is why I said you should not have saved me." Her voice was soft, but the truth inside it was sharp. Ethan walked closer, standing beside her. He did not touch her, but his presence was steady, a quiet promise. "Then let them come," he said calmly. "I don't care who they are. You're not alone anymore." Liara turned to him, her glowing eyes wide, her mouth slightly open as if no one had ever spoken such words to her. She searched his face for doubt, but found none. For the first time in years, perhaps, she allowed herself to believe someone might stand with her. But just as the air softened between them, a shadow crossed the stars outside the window. A faint glimmer, like the flash of metal catching distant light, moved across the darkness. Ethan narrowed his eyes. It was gone in an instant, but the chill it left behind was real. Liara saw it too. She drew in a sharp breath, her glow dimming. "They are searching," she whispered. Ethan looked at her, then back at the stars. Something unseen was moving closer. He didn't know who they were yet, but he knew one thing for certain. The quiet life he had carried until now was already over. Liara had revealed her truth, and with it came the beginning of something greater, something dangerous. Yes, but also something that bound them together in ways neither of them yet understood. The silence of the ship held steady, but it was no longer empty. It was the silence before change, the silence before footsteps in the dark. The days that followed felt strange, almost dreamlike. Ethan continued to guide his small ship across the quiet lanes of space, but his thoughts were no longer on navigation or fuel. They were on the girl who now shared his cabin, the one who had told him her name, Liara. Every time he looked at her, he felt that the ship was less empty than before, though he could not explain why. Liara was changing too. She no longer sat in silence all the time. Sometimes she asked small questions about the buttons on the control panel, or about Earth, a place she had only heard whispers of in the markets. Ethan answered patiently, painting pictures with words of blue oceans and green forests. She listened quietly, her glowing eyes reflecting something he had not seen before, wonder. Yet even with these small moments of peace, Ethan felt a tension beneath the surface. Every time he caught her staring at the stars, there was a shadow in her expression, a reminder of the words she had spoken. They will come, one evening. While Ethan adjusted the ship's sensors, Liara stood at the window again. The stars drifted by slowly, scattered like diamonds across black velvet. But she was not watching their beauty. Her eyes were sharp, searching, as though waiting for something to appear. "Do you see them?" she whispered suddenly. Ethan turned. "See who?" Her voice was so soft it was almost lost in the hum of the ship. "The ones who hunt me." Ethan walked to her side and looked out. For a long moment, he saw nothing but the still night of space. Then, just at the edge of vision, a flicker of movement, a light that did not belong to a star. It vanished almost instantly, but it was enough to chill him. He tried to steady his voice. "Could be another ship passing." Liara shook her head slowly. "No, they follow quietly. Never too close, always just enough to remind me they are there." Her certainty left no room for argument. Ethan placed a hand on the panel, thinking. He had bought her for only 3 credits, but what he carried now was priceless and dangerous. Still, as he looked at her, he knew he would not send her away, whatever came. They would face it together. That night, silence filled the ship more heavily than before. Ethan tried to sleep, but his mind would not rest. He thought about the flicker in the stars, about Liara's warning, about what might happen if they were caught. It was deep into the night when he finally heard it. A faint scraping sound against the hull, like claws brushing metal. He sat up, instantly, heart racing. Liara was already awake, her glowing eyes wide, her breath quick. "They are here," she whispered. Ethan moved to the window, but space looked empty. Still, the sound came again, faint but real, running along the outside of the ship. Something was out there, unseen in the dark. The cabin lights flickered once, then steadied. Ethan glanced at Liara. Her glow had brightened, faint light spreading beneath her skin. It was not fear alone, it was something else, something she was holding back. The sound outside grew sharper, closer. Ethan pressed his hand against the wall, feeling the vibration of whatever moved across the hull. His chest tightened, not with anger, but with the deep weight of responsibility. He had chosen this path when he lifted his hand in the market. Now there was no turning back. Liara stood slowly, her silver hair catching the dim light. She moved toward him, her voice trembling. "I told you, no one who keeps me stays safe." Ethan met her eyes, steady, then let them find both of us here. You're not alone anymore. For a long moment, she only stared at him. Her glow softened, less from fear and more from something he could not name. It was as if his words reached a place in her that had been locked for too long. The scraping outside stopped. Silence pressed down once more, heavy and waiting. Liara closed her eyes, and for the first time, she did not tremble. She breathed deeply. And when she opened them again, her glow pulsed brighter than before. Like starlight breaking through clouds. "They will not take me," she whispered, as though speaking to herself as much as to him. "Not while I have strength left." Ethan stood beside her, the two of them framed against the small window, the stars beyond watching like silent witnesses. And though the ship was quiet again, he knew the danger had not passed. The hunters were close, too close. The silence now was not the silence of peace. It was the silence before a storm. The human had taken her far from the auction house, into the wide and strange city where lights glowed on every corner, and machines hummed softly in the distance. She walked close to him, her steps careful, her sack now gone, revealing her face to the world for the first time. People stared, some with surprise, some with whispers, and some with fear. But he kept walking, his head high, as if he did not care about their eyes. For the first time, she felt a strange warmth inside her chest. It was not fear, and it was not shame. It was something she did not know how to name. She kept her eyes low, but every time she glanced at him, she felt that warmth grow stronger. He treated her not as something bought, but as someone who mattered. That night, he found her a small room in a quiet place. He gave her food, real food, not scraps, and told her gently, "You are safe here." The words echoed in her ears like a song she had never heard before. Safe? Could such a word truly belong to her? She sat on the bed, holding the bowl of food, and looked at him. Questions formed in her heart. Why would a human spend even 3 coins on someone like her? Why risk himself when others had turned away? She could not understand, yet she wanted to. As days passed, he began to ask her simple things. Her name, where she came from, what she remembered. At first, she stayed silent, her lips locked with old fear. But slowly, she began to speak, her voice trembling but real. She told him pieces of her past, how her people had been scattered, how she had been taken, and how silence had been forced upon her. He listened without interruption. He did not judge, he did not mock, he did not walk away. His quiet listening became something she started to trust. One evening, as the stars shone above the city, he placed something on the table between them. It was a small pendant, old and simple, but carved with a symbol she knew from long ago. Her breath caught. "How did he have this?" "This was found near the edge of the markets," he said softly. "Does it mean something to you?" Her eyes filled with tears she had not allowed herself to cry for years. That symbol was of her people, her lost family. She touched it with shaking hands, and for the first time, she felt the walls around her heart crack. She looked at him and whispered, "Why are you doing this for me?" His answer was calm, steady, and simple, because no one else did. In that moment, something shifted inside her. She was no longer just the girl who had been sold with a sack on her head. She was someone whose story was beginning again, and he was the reason why. But what neither of them knew was that someone was already watching, someone who had noticed her escape from the auction house. Shadows moved in silence, and far away, voices whispered her name. The night felt strangely still, as if the entire city was waiting for something to happen. The human walked beside the alien girl, who still kept her head low, her sack long gone, but her silence remaining. She had changed since the auction, but there was something in her eyes now, something that was hard to name. It wasn't fear anymore. It wasn't sorrow. It was something that almost looked like light. They moved through narrow streets, each step echoing against the stone walls. She glanced at him every now and then, as if she wanted to say something but didn't know how. He didn't push her. Instead, he kept walking, letting her set the pace. She had been controlled all her life. Now, for once, she would choose. Finally, she stopped near the edge of a quiet courtyard. She lifted her hand slightly, pointing at the old fountain in the center. This place. She whispered softly, her voice carrying a weight that made the air tremble. He looked at her, surprised. It was the first time she had spoken more than a few words. What about it? He asked gently. Her eyes shimmered. This was where my people once gathered. Long ago. Before the markets. Before the cages. I remember it. He felt the meaning in her words. It wasn't just a memory, it was a thread that connected her to something she thought she had lost. Forever. The fountain was cracked, the water dry, but in her gaze, it still lived. The human walked closer, placing his hand on the worn stone. Then we'll bring it back, he said quietly. Her head snapped toward him, disbelief flickering across her face. Bring it back. Yes, he replied simply. If this place matters to you, then it matters to me. It should matter to everyone. We'll clean it, restore it, fill it with water again. It doesn't have to stay broken. For a moment, she couldn't answer. Her lips trembled, her throat tight. She had never heard words like that, not for her, not for anything she cared about. Slowly, her hand reached out, brushing against the stone as if testing if this was real. But the stillness of the night was broken. A sound came from the shadows, footsteps, too many to count. She froze. Eddie instinctively stepped in front of her. From the dark corners of the courtyard, figures emerged, cloaked and sharp-eyed. They weren't random strangers. Their stares were focused, to intent. They had been waiting. The leader spoke, his voice low and cold. So, this is where you've been hiding. His gaze flicked to the alien girl, and the weight of his words made her shrink back. Do you really think you can escape what you are? The human tightened his stance. His chest rose as he took a steady breath, not moving away, not giving ground. She isn't yours anymore, he said firmly, and she isn't what you think she is. The leader smirked. You have no idea what you've taken in, human, no idea what she carries. The alien girl's breath caught. She knew what they meant. She had always feared this moment, the truth of her identity, standing on the edge of being revealed. The silence stretched, thick and unbroken. Then, for the first time, she stepped forward without hiding. Her voice, though soft, carried across the courtyard. I am not what you made me. I am not your captive anymore. Her words struck like a spark in the night, and in that moment, the human realized this was no ending. This was only the beginning of something far greater.